How much of your life is real, and how much of it is just pretending? Imagine this. You wake up every morning and put on a smile. You answer politely when you'd rather scream. You agree when you want to say no. You're helpful, supportive, endlessly available, the kind of person others admire because you always seem strong, cheerful, and reliable. On the outside, everything looks perfect. But when the night comes, when you finally lay your head on the pillow, the mask starts to slip. There's a hollowness that no achievement, no compliment, no relationship seems able to fill. A quiet voice whispers inside you, "This isn't me. This isn't my life." This is the hidden cost of pretending. You see, pretending is not always a conscious choice. Often, it's survival. You learn to do it early, be the good kid, never cause trouble, always put others first. And somewhere along the way, that mask became glued to your skin. The person you show to the world is not the person you feel inside. And while others applaud your patience, your kindness, your strength, deep down, you are slowly eroding. Every fake smile, every forced yes, every moment you bury your truth for the sake of acceptance. These are not harmless gestures. They are acts of self-betrayal. And self-betrayal has a price. It eats away at your soul, turning you into a stranger in your own body. The more you pretend, the less you belong to yourself. And this, whether you realize it or not, is the very definition of self-sabotage. Because what destroys us is not always the cruelty of others, but the lies we tell ourselves just to be loved. If this message already resonates with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll all be the first to know when I release the next video filled with powerful insights that can shift the way you see yourself and the world. Pretending is one of the most subtle yet destructive habits we carry. It creeps into our lives so silently that most of us never even notice it. From childhood, we're conditioned to adjust our behavior in order to fit in, to gain approval, to avoid punishment. We learn very early that certain parts of ourselves are not acceptable. Maybe you were told not to cry because it showed weakness, or not to get angry because it was disrespectful, or not to speak too loudly because it was rude. And so you began to shape yourself into something the world would applaud. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You agreed when you wanted to refuse. You said, "I'm fine," when every bone in your body was breaking under the weight of silence. At first, it feels like survival. Pretending gives you a sense of control. It wins you praise, it avoids conflict, and it makes people like you. But over time, pretending shifts from being a strategy to becoming an identity. The mask that you once wore only occasionally becomes glued to your skin. And here lies the true cost. You start to forget who you were before the mask. You start to believe that the role you're replaying is the only version of you that exists. This is where self-sabotage begins. Because every time you pretend, you abandon yourself. You whisper to your inner world, "You don't matter. You're too much. Stay quiet. Be small." And your soul listens. The tragedy is not that others believe your act, it's that you begin to believe it too. You come to accept the silence as normal, the sacrifice as expected, the emptiness as just part of life. But beneath the surface, your truth is suffocating. The most painful part about pretending is that it promises connection, but delivers isolation. You think that if you keep everyone else happy, they will finally love you. But the truth is brutal. People don't love your real self when you're re-pretending. They love the mask. They love the version of you that exists to serve them, to make them comfortable, to keep them from facing their own discomfort. And the more they praise this version of you, the more you feel unseen, misunderstood, invisible. You're trapped in a cruel paradox. You're surrounded by people, yet you've never felt lonelier. Think of how often you've sacrificed your own needs just to maintain the image of being good. Maybe at work you accept every request, every deadline, every burden, because you don't want to appear weak or uncooperative. Maybe in relationships you tolerate disrespect, you bite your tongue, you swallow your pride, all to avoid conflict. Maybe even with family you smile and nod, presenting yourself as the reliable one who never complains, who always carries the weight in silence. On the surface, this looks like a strength, but inside, it's self-erasure. You're digging your own grave one smile, one yes, one fake laugh at a time. And the body keeps the score. That hollow feeling in your chest, the tightness in your throat, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes, these are the symptoms of a soul in exile. You can't fake forever. Your psyche will demand truth, even if it has to scream through anxiety, depression, burnout, or physical illness. Carl Jung once said that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, the suffering you feel isn't random. It is the consequence of running from the truth of who you are. Pretending doesn't erase pain, it multiplies it. Let's look deeper. Pretending teaches you to repress your anger until it festers into resentment. Pretending forces you to hide your sadness until it hardens into apathy. Pretending makes you say yes so often that no becomes foreign to your tongue. And the ultimate consequence? You forget your own voice. You lose touch with your own desires. You become so practiced at performing for others that when someone asks what you want, you don't even know how to answer. This is why pretending is not just a bad habit, it is self-sabotage. It robs you of authenticity, the very core of what makes life meaningful. It tricks you into trading your truth for approval, your freedom for belonging, your power for comfort. And while the world may reward you in the short term with compliments, promotions, or temporary peace, the long-term cost is unbearable. You become a stranger in your own life. Pretending is a prison disguised as protection. You build walls to avoid rejection, but those walls trap you in a role that was never truly yours. And here is the most tragic part. No matter how perfect your performance, no matter how convincing your mask, you can never escape the silent cry of your soul. Deep down, you will always know when you are betraying yourself. So when you look at your life, ask yourself honestly, how much of it is real and how much of it is just pretending? Because the longer you keep playing a role that isn't yours, the more you are sabotaging the very life you were meant to live. And until you confront this truth, no amount of success, no amount of approval, no amount of pretending will ever fill the emptiness that keeps whispering inside you. This is the true cost of pretending, and it is a debt that only you can choose to stop paying. Niccolo Machiavelli has often been painted as a cynical manipulator, a cold strategist who cared little for morality. Yet if we strip away the caricature and listen closely to what he actually observed about human behavior, we discover something striking. Machiavelli was not encouraging deception as much as he was exposing it. He saw the masks people wear, the games they play, and he dared to describe them without the sugarcoating of false virtue. And in doing so, he revealed a brutal truth. Pretending, especially the kind meant to appear excessively virtuous, carries a hidden cost that will eventually destroy you. He once wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. For all men can see a thing, but few can come close to touch it." What he meant is simple: appearances rule the world. People judge what they see far more than what they experience firsthand. They prefer the spectacle of goodness over the reality of truth. And so, in order to be accepted, most of us craft a performance. We polish the surface, we act the part. We give people what they want to see, rather than risk showing them who we really are. But Machiavelli, in his ruthless clarity, warned against this very trap. He understood that when you pretend too much, when you constantly strive to appear harmless, endlessly good, perfectly moral, you set yourself up not for respect, but for exploitation. Because in the eyes of the powerful, the overly good are not admired, they are used. Consider the workplace. The colleague who always agrees, who never sets boundaries, who pretends to be endlessly available at first, they are praised. They're called dependable, cooperative, and easy to work with. But slowly, they are taken advantage of. More tasks land on their desk, more responsibilities pile up, and still they smile and say yes. What Machiavelli would point out is that this person, by pretending to be perpetually good, has made themselves predictable, weak, and therefore expendable. The same is true in relationships. When you always present yourself as endlessly forgiving, always accommodating, always patient, you might think you're protecting the relationship. But in reality, you're teaching the other person that your needs do not matter. You're showing them that no matter how they treat you, you will endure it. And over time, this is not love. This is servitude. Machiavelli would call it what it is: self-sabotage disguised as virtue. Machiavelli's brilliance was in stripping away illusions. He looked at power and saw it for what it was, not an arena of ideals, but of reality. And the reality is this: those who pretend too much, who live only to appear good in the eyes of others, surrender their power to those willing to see through the game. To him, power was not about being loved unconditionally. It was about commanding respect. And sometimes, respect cannot be earned through constant virtue. In fact, constant virtue often becomes a weakness. This is where the connection to pretending becomes painfully clear. Pretending to be good all the time might win temporary affection, but it will never create real strength. Because as Machiavelli showed us, the world is not built on ideals, it is built on perception and consequence. If your performance of goodness leaves you powerless, invisible, and easily manipulated, then your virtue has turned into a weapon against yourself. And yet, here lies the paradox. Machiavelli was not suggesting you abandon all morality or turn into a monster. He was reminding us that appearances matter, but appearances without substance are hollow. Pretending too much makes you fragile. When life inevitably tests you, the mask will crack, and beneath it, you may discover there is nothing left but resentment and emptiness. Think of the countless people who spend their lives trying to be the perfect employee, partner, or friend. Outwardly, they are admired, but inwardly, they are crumbling. They live according to what others demand, not according to who they truly are. And when the applause stops, they find themselves alone, confused, and powerless. Machiavelli would say that such a life is not strength, but submission. The cost of pretending, then, is not only personal. It is political, social, existential. In every area of life, from the intimate to the public, pretending to be what you are not creates vulnerability. It exposes you to control by those who recognize your performance. And it prevents you from wielding the one form of power that truly matters, the power of authenticity. So when Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both, he was not glorifying cruelty. He was warning us, if you spend your life pretending to be loved by everyone, you will lose respect. And when you lose respect, you lose everything. Pretending might feel safer. It might earn you approval in the short term. But in the long run, it is the fastest road to invisibility, to exploitation, and to the slow erosion of your true self. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. And if we are honest, we see it today. The question is not whether pretending works. It does for a while. The question is, at what cost? And is the applause of others really worth the destruction of your own soul? If Machiavelli exposed the dangers of pretending in the political and social realm, modern psychology revealed the devastating impact it has on the inner world. Where Machiavelli warned us about power and manipulation, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud dove into the psyche itself, showing us how masks and repression create self-sabotage from the inside out. Their insights peel back the curtain on why pretending feels so exhausting, why it breeds anxiety, and why it ultimately robs us of the life we long for. Jung introduced the concept of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. The persona is useful. It allows us to function, to adapt, to survive in social systems that demand order. But Jung's warning was clear. The persona is not the self. It is a role, a disguise, an interface between our inner world and society. The danger comes when we begin to mistake this mask for who we are. Pretending, then, is nothing more than over-identification with the persona. When you force yourself to always appear kind, patient, forgiving, or strong, when you hide your anger, silence your sadness, or deny your vulnerability, you are feeding the mask at the expense of your real self. And over time, the mask consumes you. You forget that beneath the persona lies the raw, unfiltered self, waiting to be seen. Jung called what we repress the shadow. The shadow is the collection of all the parts of ourselves we've denied, hidden, or buried because they didn't fit the expectations of family, culture, or society. Anger, desire, fear, ambition, all pushed underground, all locked away in the dark. But here's the problem: the shadow doesn't disappear. What you repress does not vanish. It waits, it leaks, it sabotages. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is why pretending is so costly. Every time you smile to hide your rage, every time you say yes when you want to scream no, every time you fake strength while drowning inside, you are feeding the shadow. And eventually, the shadow finds its way back. It shows up in explosive anger, in depression that won't lift, in anxiety you can't explain, in patterns of self-sabotage you repeat without knowing why. Freud, though often criticized, revealed a similar mechanism. He described the psyche as a battlefield between the id, our primal drives, the superego, our moral voice, and the ego, the mediator between the two. Pretending is the ego's desperate attempt to satisfy the superego, to look moral, proper, acceptable, even if it means repressing the raw truth of the id. But repression has consequences. What is repressed does not vanish. It returns in disguised forms: nightmares, compulsions, irrational fears, breakdowns. Freud's insight still rings true. The more you repress, the more you are controlled by what you refuse to face. Both Jung and Freud understood that pretending is not neutral. It is an act of violence against the psyche. It fractures us. It divides us into the person we present and the person we hide. And the wider that gap grows, the more unstable we become. Jung described this fracture as a soul in exile, a person who no longer belongs to themselves because they've traded truth for acceptance. Freud described it as neurosis, the endless conflict between what we feel and what we allow ourselves to express. Think about the toll this takes on everyday life. Anxiety is often nothing more than the nervous system trying to hold together the performance of pretending. Depression can be the weight of years of self-denial pressing down on the soul. Burnout is not just about overwork, it is about the exhaustion of playing a role that isn't yours. And here is the cruelest irony. Pretending begins as a way to protect ourselves, to keep us safe from rejection, judgment, or punishment. But in the long run, it is pretending that destroys us. Because you cannot repress your truth without paying a price. The persona may protect you socially, but the shadow will demand its due. And when it does, it often feels like your life is unraveling. Jung offered a way out: individuation, the process of integrating all parts of yourself, light and shadow alike, until you become whole. Individuation demands that you stop over-identifying with the persona and confront what you buried in the shadow. It asks you to face your anger, your fear, your longing, your truth, not to destroy them, but to integrate them. Because only when you bring these unconscious parts into the light can you reclaim your power. Freud, too, though focused on analysis, pointed to the same truth. Healing comes not from pretending to be good, but from confronting the reality of what you are. Awareness, not repression, is the path forward. The psychological verdict is clear. Pretending is self-sabotage because it alienates you from yourself. It breeds repression, fuels anxiety, and guarantees that your unconscious will sabotage you until you finally listen. And the only way out is to turn inward, to meet your shadow, to strip away the mask of the persona, and to reclaim the parts of yourself you've exiled. The cost of pretending, according to psychology, is nothing less than your wholeness. And unless you are willing to face this cost, you will continue to sabotage yourself, calling it fate. when in truth, it is only the price of living a lie. In theory, pretending sounds abstract, a philosophical warning, a psychological pattern. But in reality, it's everywhere. Especially in modern American life, where appearances often matter more than reality, pretending has become the cultural norm. We're taught to smile through pain, to celebrate toxic positivity, to silence conflict, and to keep grinding even when our souls are exhausted. And while society applauds this performance, the truth is that it's killing us from the inside. Let's start with the workplace. In the United States, the culture of hustle dominates. Productivity is a badge of honor. Exhaustion is mistaken for dedication. And beneath it all, there's a quiet epidemic of pretending. Employees wear smiles during meetings, nod at their bosses' every suggestion, and answer emails with no problem, even as they drown in unrealistic workloads. People pretend to be engaged when they're burned out, to be passionate about jobs that drain them, to be resilient when they're on the verge of collapse. On LinkedIn, everyone looks unstoppable, but behind closed doors, millions are collapsing under stress, anxiety, and depression. Pretending at work might win you promotions, but the cost is burnout, and burnout is nothing less than your soul screaming that the life you reliving isn't sustainable. Now consider relationships. Pretending here is just as dangerous. How many people in America stay in relationships where they suppress their true feelings just to keep the peace? How many partners smile through dinners, avoid hard conversations, and pretend to be satisfied, even as resentment builds like poison in their hearts? The rise of toxic positivity has made this even worse. People are taught that love means never getting angry, never complaining, never showing dissatisfaction. But what looks like harmony is often just silence, and silence is where relationships go to die. Pretending to be in love creates an illusion of closeness, but it erodes intimacy at its core. Because intimacy is built not on pretending everything is fine, but on daring to reveal the truth of who you are. And then there is the broader social life. America's obsession with social media has turned pretending into a full-time job. Instagram feeds filled with smiling families, perfect vacations, gym selfies, and motivational quotes create the illusion of flawless lives. But behind the filter, there's loneliness, anxiety, and debt. People are performing happiness for likes while quietly unraveling when no one's watching. Social media rewards the mask, not the truth, and millions are trapped in the cycle of chasing validation at the cost of their authenticity. So why do we do this? Because pretending feels safer than the truth. In the short term, it avoids conflict. It wins us approval. It keeps us in the tribe. But in the long run, it sabotages us. The American workplace is plagued with burnout. The American family struggles with disconnection. And American individuals feel lonelier than ever, despite being more connected online. The pretending promised safety, but it delivered emptiness. What then is the solution? The answer is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion, nor is it to abandon every responsibility. The solution is awakening, choosing truth over performance. That means daring to say no at work, even when your reputation as the team player is at risk. It means admitting that you're not okay, instead of pasting on another fake smile. It means telling your partner the truth about what you need, even if it risks conflict. It means setting boundaries with friends and family instead of exhausting yourself trying to keep everyone happy. And yes, it means stepping back from the endless game of social media validation, where pretending is rewarded and authenticity is often ignored. Awakening is not easy. Truth-telling feels dangerous. Setting boundaries feels selfish. Removing the mask feels terrifying because we've worn it for so long. But the deeper danger is in continuing to live a lie. The soul can endure hardship, but it cannot endure falsehood forever. Pretending will always collapse under its own weight. The alternative is radical honesty, with yourself first, and then with others. Jung called this individuation. Machiavelli might call it reclaiming your power. It is the act of refusing to self-sabotage through pretense and instead choosing to live as who you really are. Imagine what life could look like if you stopped pretending, if you didn't smile when you were breaking, if you didn't agree just to avoid being disliked, if you didn't work yourself to exhaustion just to prove you were worthy, if you didn't curate your life for approval, but lived it for meaning. That's not a weakness, that's freedom. The American culture of constant pretending is making us sick, but you don't have to be part of it. The moment you stop playing the role they handed you, you begin to reclaim your soul. And in that moment, pretending no longer owns you. At this point, we have seen the evidence from every angle. Machiavelli warned us that the performance of constant virtue is not strength, but weakness. Jung showed us that over-identifying with the persona tears us away from our true self, while Freud revealed that repression always returns to sabotage us. And we've looked at the modern world, where pretending has become a cultural epidemic, at work, in relationships, on social media. So now, the question turns to you. How much longer will you keep pretending? How many more smiles will you fake? How many more yeses will you force? How many more masks will you wear before you finally collapse under the weight of it all? The truth is, pretending doesn't protect you. It doesn't save you. It doesn't even truly connect you to others. What it does is drain you, bit by bit, day by day, until one day you wake up and realize you've been living a life that was never yours. And that is the cruelest form of self-sabotage. Not that others have taken your life from you, but that you have given it away willingly in exchange for approval, safety, or comfort. But it doesn't have to stay this way. The path forward is not to abandon responsibility or to reject every role you've ever played. The path forward is to reclaim your truth, to set boundaries, to say no when you mean no, to stop smiling when you're broken, to stop giving pieces of yourself away just to be loved. Because here's the reality, the world doesn't need another mask. The world doesn't need another performance. The world doesn't need another person pretending to be fine while dying inside. What the world needs is you, your truth, your authenticity, your raw, unfiltered self. That's where your power lies. That's where your freedom begins. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, some people will leave when you stop performing for them. But the ones who remain will finally be loving you for who you are, not for who you pretended to be. And more importantly, you will finally belong to yourself. That is a kind of love and freedom no mask can ever give you. So I'll leave you with this awakening. Stop pretending. Stop sabotaging yourself. Because life is too short to live as someone else's version of you. The world may judge you for your truth, but it will respect you for it. And when you look in the mirror at night, instead of emptiness, you will see yourself again, alive, real, and free. This is the cost of pretending. But it is also the invitation to stop paying that price. If this message touched something inside you, take a moment right now to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next awakening message. I want you to be the first to hear the truths that can change the way you see yourself and the world. And I'd love to hear from you. What part of this message spoke to you the most? Which idea, which story, which lesson will you carry into your own life? Leave a comment below. I read every one of them, and your reflections might just inspire someone else who's watching. Together, let's stop pretending. Together, let's start living.